Welcome to Business Leader Breakthroughs, where we help unlock the potential in you, your teams, and your business. I'm your host, Ryan Castle, along with Dr. Mike Ashby. We'll share insights, experiences, and stories on achieving breakthrough success in business and life. In addition to a podcast, The Breakthrough is a coaching and advisory business that provides programs for business leaders, owners, and managers to develop your skills and capabilities to boost your business and enjoy a better life. To learn more, click the link in the episode show notes or go to thebreakthrough.co. Now let the breakthroughs begin. Mike, we're up for another episode of the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And another episode, or certainly another piece that's big in the psyche of New Zealand at the moment, is the Rugby World Cup.
Absolutely, yeah.
And as Kiwis, we're pretty proud of our All Blacks and what they've achieved.
We are, and I'm conscious that people listening to the podcast, some of whom are kind of rugby. Actually, it's not so much about the rugby. The fascination for me, all right, over and above the rugby, because yes, lifelong fan, etc. But I am just fascinated by the level of performance that the All Blacks demonstrate. And I keep making the point, this is one of the most successful organisations in any endeavour. To have that kind of winning record, 85, 87%, is not about sport. It is about how a group of people organise themselves to excel over and over and over again. And they've got really since 2004, they are on a par with great companies like Apple, which has also done a pretty fantastic job. Amazon, which has had that growth. But it's even more precise in a sporting sense, because if you lose enough, you're going to kind of your position in the rankings going to drop down. So I think they were really, and it's very, very transparent, right? In a way that business is not.
So much so, and we're fans, but rugby is professional now. This is a business organisation whose product happens to be a sport, but they are a professional organisation, right from the way they are governed to the sponsorship deals and commercials that they have to make work, through to the performance on the field. And even the very best companies in the world normally only have to give profit indications once a quarter and release the results once every 6 months. As a sporting organisation in the professional era, you are your results are getting released. Like at the moment, Rugby World Cup, they're getting released about every 5 days.
And you're as good as your last game. And yes, you carry, as a company, you carry investors in. Particularly in New Zealand, it is part of our culture. It is something that we have a national pride in and a national investment in, that it's kind of, it's not quite the happiness of an entire nation is contingent on it. I think we're a little more mature about it now that we've finally got that second one out of the way. Certainly before 2011, it was pretty desperate.
It was.
But what's really interesting is, I'm so interested in the way Steve Hansen thinks and talks about his leadership, and in particular I'm interested in the history of what he stepped into, what he's been part of since 2004. So it started with Graham Henry. When they started out, they took over as the coaching team, and even that in itself, that was a development. We didn't just have one coach, we had a coaching team. There was a culture of heavy drinking. There was a culture of complacency. It was not in good shape. And these guys sat down, so Graham Henry, Steve Hansen, Wayne Smith, really critical part of it. The big thinker in all of it.
Huge.
Brian Lahore, Tana Rumanga was the captain, Richie McCaw was already an heir apparent.
Yes.
And a bunch of those guys sat down and took a look at what they did. And the fundamental problem was whatever plan the coaches had usually disappeared on field, and the game would be lost because the players wouldn't execute the plan, and not through lack of a good plan. Sometimes a lack of a good plan, but
what is it that Mike Tyson says?
Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and then everything changes, right? And that's what was happening, consistently happening, was that they weren't dealing with the challenges, and they realised that they couldn't do it from the coaching box, which was massive particularly for Graham Henry, who was pretty old school, autocratic. He used to be a teacher. He was accustomed to kind of laying down the law.
Headmaster of Auckland Grammar School, used to, it was like my way or the highway.
Totally.
And that's even for him evolving his leadership style to be able to take on the feedback from those players and go, how do we resolve this? Not like, I've got to have all the answers and let me tell you how we should do it.
Yeah.
But being open to that.
Huge. And look, he'd coached Wales and he'd coached the Lions. He'd been a very successful coach with that approach. And an example of how he had to let that go and shift the leadership from the coaching box to the field was Tana Rumanga. There was a story I've heard several times, including from Raylene, how Tana said to Graham Henry, "Hey Ted, who's the pre-match talk for? Who's the team talk for?" And Graham Henry said, "Well, T, it's for you. It's help you get kind of fired up and all inspired." And T said, and Tana Rumanga said, "Well, Ted, I think it's for you. It doesn't work for us." And Henry was shattered. It was kind of, oh my God.
Had spent all week planning it,
like
thinking about the right
sermon.
thing to say, making sure it was going to be delivered with
choosing the
impeccable,
right words and firing them up. Not interested. And so I think that an incredible ability to let go of what had been successful but wasn't working for these guys.
And if we unpick that a little bit, I'm sure part of why it wasn't working is that different players are individuals and they respond to things in different ways, right?
Yeah.
Some of them will be wanting to be inside their own heads pre-game.
Yep.
They, you see lots of them these days walking around with headphones on, they're in their own zone. All the discussion has already happened and they know the job they have to play and they will motivate themselves. We're talking about elite sports people here. Yeah. You don't need to motivate them.
No.
They are out to perform at the highest level.
They're there to win.
But the way they get in their zone to deliver at that level of performance is going to be different for each individual.
Yeah.
So as a leader, when you go, I've got a one-size-fits-all that's going to help everyone get motivated, help everyone be focused on the job they need to do, it's just never going to work. You've got to get some of that individual view happening.
You've got to get that individual view, and I watched I was on a plane and I watched the Richie McCaw documentary Chasing Great, and he was a very unusual sort of character, incredibly intense, and the closer he got to the game, the more inside he went. And he said, even for the 2015 World Cup final, which was his last game, he said he would not allow any thoughts beyond those 80 minutes. Possibly 85 minutes if it went to extra time, that's all. So nothing existed. He had no thoughts about his future. That incredible mental discipline. And he'd just close down, close in. And he'd be, by acknowledgement, pretty difficult to live with because he was so intense. Now he's really, really unusual. But I guess the point is, isn't it interesting that the individual, part of the challenge for the leaders, the coaches, people like Wayne Smith and Steve Hansen and Ian Foster, any of those guys, is that having different approaches for each individual, and at the same time, there's one huge message about team. Absolutely. And the importance of team. Brian Lahore actually was the other person who was in on that session, and he talked about how better people make better All Blacks. So they were very much focused on taking care of the individuals as individuals. And so when we say in the program, managers all staff have three questions. Do you care about me? Can I trust you? And are you committed to quality? Well, the do you care about me in the All Black context was, hey, you've come from this sort of background, you've achieved maybe this at school, maybe not so much. Here's your career and it's going to end. So how do we equip you for post-rugby? So huge amount of attention, including guys like my old friend Neil Sorensen, who was in charge of the performance side of it. And that was a lot about player welfare. So very, deeply concerned about individuals, their caliber, their curiosity, their behaviours, and then they had a rule: no dickheads. So if your values didn't fit, if you were not a good person, if you were not kind of aligned with the team, you wouldn't last.
And we see, by contrast, at the moment, the French camp, and of course our only insight is via the media, but the media saying, sounds like there is a revolt happening in the French camp, and the captain's not being selected because he's fallen out with the coach, and blah, blah, blah. And that's a repeat of, I think, 2011 in New Zealand, kind of the same thing. And you just can't build a cohesive culture and then an on-field performance when you got that kind of stuff going on.
Well, I think they do have a funny sort of culture, though, because if you remember, they played in that final outstandingly well. But that just says that their culture was less about team and more about individuals, perhaps. It's a different culture. What we see in our culture with the All Blacks, or with this successful organisation, is consistently delivering because of an immense focus on the team and teamwork and being good in the team. And then they've got a whole lot of stuff about the legacy in terms of, you don't occupy that jersey by right, it's only yours, you're borrowing it, you're leaving it in a better place, and all those kind of, rituals and stuff. But fundamentally, it's about the team comes first. And we know that in any organisations, the most successful organisations are those that are organised around teams. Remember the work we've seen Marcus Buckingham do, for example, on how much more engaged people are when they are part of a team. And I think the culture in today's organisations, the expectation on today's organisations, actually has to be around, these are groups of teams. I think we're beginning to understand that dynamic in the workplace, that people are engaged as part of a team. How we do that deliberately is one of the challenges, I think, one of the great challenges.
And the All Blacks talk about this term of devolved leadership. Coming back to the challenge they were facing, things were, there was a pre-game plan, or game plan prior to the match starting. Everyone thought it might unfold this way, so that's what they planned for. Things then happened on the field, and they just didn't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And you couldn't go as a player, you couldn't go, ho, could you just pause the match for a moment?
Yeah, that's right.
I just need to go up and talk to the coach and decide what we're going to do now that everything's changed.
Yeah.
So they figured out that they really needed to devolve leadership down to a senior player group who could make on-field decisions in there. And the All Blacks then had a fantastic mental skills coach, Gilbert Anoka, which by all accounts has been phenomenally influential, helping people do things like get grounded right in the middle of the highest pressure situations, to be able to pause, ground themselves, get calm, and go, what's the best decision here right now?
Yeah.
And the only way they've been able to do that is this idea of devolved leadership. And it's this has also come through in the military. A lot of the military, the old style of command and control of someone sitting in a battle room thousands of miles away with their cups of tea, making decisions about how things would unfold. And they just know that things change exceptionally quickly on a battlefield, and you have to equip your on-field battle leaders with the data, the information, the skills, the knowledge to be able to make split-second decisions. And nowhere is life more real than on battlefield.
For sure.
And the amount of pressure they face by comparison. And so a lot of the military teaching now is around devolved leadership. How do we make decisions in the field quickly?
And the interesting thing from again go back to the All Blacks is it failed massively. In 2007 it failed massively, that devolved leadership. That it was that piece that failed, the decision making on the field in the face of an intense competitor and all of that sort of stuff. The courage piece, the real learning piece, was to stick with that coaching team, to back them despite the failures. It's, prior to it, they had, if you'd failed to win the World Cup, you were gone. And instead they stuck with it. And now we've seen the results, not just in 2011 when they won, but actually in 2015 when they won again. Because these culture things, they are not short term. It took 8 years to build that culture, and then another 4 to continue it, and another 4. You're talking about 16 years. A real long time that Steve Hansen in particular has been involved. And what you're seeing is a whole lot of learning that's gone with that. I think one of the many interesting things is there was a recent game that he went on at half time, and he gave them an absolute bollocking. What was really interesting was, in the context of that devolved leadership, you still have to have a strong leader who does the devolving, and who at certain points says, you know what, you guys are way off. As on-field leaders, you are not awake. You are just scraping by. You're mucking around. And he gave them. One of the guys said, "You don't see it very often, so I really enjoyed it." It was kind of getting a serious bollocking. But devolved leadership is not inverted leadership.
No,
it's not abdicating. It's not abdicating. It's still in the context of what are you trying to achieve.
I was having a bit of a laugh last night. I was watching some sport online, and they were giving the NFL the gridiron results out of the US, and they're about 5 games deep in their season now, and 3 or 4 coaches have already been fired because their win record in the first 5 rounds isn't up to par.
That's tough.
And it was just comparing the insight that the All Blacks have had of going, that coaching team could have easily been fired after 2007.
Oh, yeah.
And at that stage, even then, I think like apparently Americans are still doing now, this thought that a single individual can come in, command and control from the top, and they're the ones that are going to make all the difference.
Yeah.
It's like there is no learning going on, there is no understanding, there is no culture building.
Yeah.
It's like, let's have one charismatic leader because they'll solve everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Interesting, isn't it, that in the strongest leadership is actually the most humble, in the sense of Steve Hansen handing over that leadership because he knows that he can't execute the leadership on the field in that moment. He has to devolve it. The other observation I make about that power piece is that he doesn't often have to go on the field and give them a bollocking, but he doesn't have to. The most powerful is often the power that you don't show. It's the possibility of that power that makes you really powerful. No one wants to see Steve Hansen come on the field and give them a bollocking again. But from time to time, you have to that's the commitment to quality piece. Sometimes getting that passionate and that angry is demonstrating your commitment to quality. There's a place for it.
And it's about calling out the team for the things that they signed up to.
Yeah.
Because it's not his level of quality, it's their level of quality of what they're doing on the field, that they'll go, this is our bar performance, and we're not meeting it.
Totally. And it's not soft stuff. It's not, not sure what's happening. It's laying down the expectation, and we in a coaching sense, we talk about the bright light, the clear mirror, and the kick in the pants. And what happened the other day was a clear mirror. You're playing like rubbish. You're all over the place. You're not thinking properly. Concentrate. And the kick in the pants. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to watch not only the competition, but the psychology and what lies behind performance at the highest possible level.
Absolutely, where it's publicly on show.
Yeah.
How would you like it if every one of your business meetings with your team was live broadcast around the world
with slow motion and a television and a TV? What do they call them? The TV ref, third match official, and 2 watch. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would add a new dimension for many of us.
Yeah.
So Mike, with this idea of devolved leadership, we've got a business leader listening to the podcast and going, that all sounds great. How could they get started? What should they be keeping top of mind when they're thinking about devolved leadership in the business?
I think the very first thing they've got to do is make sure that their managers, who they're devolving to, are competent in the core skills and are disciplined about the execution of those core skills. And that's, the All Blacks take care of those basics, the very basics of what they do, and they drill on it, and they're really good at it. And then that creates the opportunity, doing that enables them to have the clarity and the time and the space to be able to express themselves. I think the other clever thing about what they do is this is a team that just loves to express itself. So they've gone with a strategy of self-expression. In the context of, they really get their core skills. They are very disciplined and very practiced. And I think it's the same in leadership. That's the point to our active management program, is helping our managers become really good at their core activities of management and very disciplined about it.
So true. And it's not to say that then every manager has to operate in exactly the same fashion, but it's a guiding set of principles and skills that they can use, and then they can defer to their individual leadership styles and things that work. Yeah. And we've seen plenty of research. The Evergreen study, which we've used plenty of times, found absolutely no difference in performance of companies based on whether their leader was seen to be charismatic or not.
Yeah, not the point.
So it's not the point of what's going on.
Yeah, it's the skill levels and the disciplines of the people on the field.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. So the All Blacks, one of the most successful organisations around, and I say organisations, not just sporting, because of what they've achieved. It would ring true that some of the things they've developed and found to be successful may well work for us in our organisations. And have a think about that devolved leadership and how you can get your managers equipped with the skills, because they're the ones that lead your teams in your business.
Yep. Totally. But there's a huge amount to learn and reflect on in that ultra high performance.
Yeah. And if you'd like to learn more about the All Blacks journey, there's a very good book called Legacy by James Kerr. Amazing insights into the culture of the All Blacks right from the beginning. But thanks for joining us on the podcast today. Share this out to some people that you know that are looking to lead their organisations. I'm sure they'll find the insights useful.
Indeed. See you next time.
Bye-bye.